Jena, for those that haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
My name's Jena Quinn. I am a business owner and pharmacist of Perfecting Peds, a company I birthed about a year ago. And we're talking about my journey, not only into the business or starting the business, but really my journey in this past 15 months of being in the thick of it and figuring it out through failure, failing forward. It's been fun, but Mike, as an entrepreneur, it's never dull.
Now, Jena, you said you birthed the business. Now, is that part of the joy of the baby thing, is you get to use all these puns and so on in your marketing and stuff?
You know what? I think because I've been in the pediatric field for over 11, 12 years, it just comes naturally. Everything kind of relates back to peds. And then on top of that, I have a 5, a 3, and a 7-month-old girl. So my business is giving medically complex children and high-risk fetal maternal medicine patients that comprehensive medication management. So really top to bottom, having them have a clinical pharmacist as a part of their team, because I think for many reasons, obviously all of our high-risk patients need it, but I think for many reasons, I think every patient needs it, and that would be amazing for us to get there. But right now, my big contracts are through 5 various facilities. I came in with really just, quite frankly, Mike taking over their consultant pharmacist role, which again has led to a lot of frustrations. So, they gave me, there's a facility that has 119 beds. All these kids are extremely medically complex. They're upward of, a low end of meds would be about 10 meds, and then high as much as 30.
You took over for somebody who was already consulting with them for those children.
Yeah, that was like the preface behind my business was, how can I get my hands on as many medically complex kids as possible? These 5 facilities, they already had a clinical pharmacist that was there reviewing their meds, supposedly. I don't want to keep it PC, but I think they were just using these minimal amount of hours that they were given. So, for example, they asked for 15 hours a month for a 119-bed medically complex facility, which is not reasonable. But then looking at these notes, it was evident that they were just looking for BP parameters or compliance checks, and then I do the clinical. So I kind of rolled in underneath their hourly rate, which they gave, a lot less than what should be given, especially if you want to do these kids right.
And you're doing that remotely?
Yeah. So I have me, and actually I have 5 other contractors, 2 pharmacy technicians who do the compliance checks, and then an intern who's super helpful, who is from my alumni, which is Rutgers, and she helps a ton too.
Are you doing it on, spreadsheets, or is there a program that you're using to communicate with your other contracted employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we use DocStation, which is awesome.
Yeah, I had Sam on the show early on. So you use that. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. So I found him early on too. So I bought my LLC in August 2021.
When you say bought, you mean to legally do the LLC. You didn't buy the patients.
No. Just my LLC. So I started as I said, I really was like, okay, I'm going to go for this because I've been thinking about the problem, and I'm like, know that we're the solution. Essentially, clinical pharmacists are to serve these kids right. So, in August 2021, I bought my LLC, and then I was on this journey of, okay, these facilities are giving me these hours. I actually didn't get the facilities until about 8 months in. So in the beginning, what I was doing was just proof of concept. So I was taking a lot of private pay patients and just saying what can I find? And I was putting them into DocStation because I found Sam and DocStation really early on. And so I was using that. It would pull in. It has a nice HL7. So you could keep everything in there. I was looking for a good intervention tracking system, and DocStation's awesome, among many other things that it does.
Do you build the families through DocStation too?
So they are coming out with a billing platform. Right now, how I do everything is via Keep. Are you familiar with that?
Is that like a kind of like a Square, like an easier accounting service?
Or like QuickBooks?
Simple or straightforward?
Yes, it's very easy. So like Keep has, email automation. So that's how I was like checking in and, publicizing what I was doing. So like Keep will every, X amount of days will spit out like another email automation for you. So it's nice. And then it has invoicing. Trying to think what else. A business line, which is great because I'm starting to use that because you don't want people reaching out to your personal cell. I'm realizing that early on a year and I'm like, okay, I need a good business line. And so I really like that it gives you like, honestly, everything business 1, 2, 3. But then DocStation is actually now doing SMS to your patients, allowing your patients to go in and schedule through their calendar link. So they're catching up. And I think DocStation is going to be doing billing too. But the reason why I was saying this journey was that the DocStation was the answer to getting insurance billed for my services. I was like, oh my God, DocStation does billing for insurances. So I set up a meeting with their person that does insurances, and basically, I would have a lot more billing leeway, if I entered what was called a collaborative practice agreement with the providers.
Have you started billing yet with the collaborative practice?
So, yeah, that's a great question, because when I got into these facilities and kind of uncovered like the complexity of the patients, I was like dumbfounded. Like, how was this organization prior given, only 15 hours? I realized a couple of things early on in it, and I really learned from my mistakes. But if you come in to anything new, right, and you have all these wonderful ideas, and then you give these providers recommendations that are like 10 to 15 recommendations for each patient, the providers just freaked out, for lack of a better word. They were like, we understand, like, these are great clinical recommendations, but for us to implement these clinical interventions on each patient is going to take months. Like, we already have like a huge workload, and you come in and rate, 15 recs on each chart. So that's where was my first error, was going in and then realizing I don't have enough hours or enough resources. So the first thing was, I was more worried about the resources, the pharmacist resources, like having the staff, than I was anything else. Like, I'm like, the money I'll worry about later.
Once you had enough staff, were you able then to supplement those hours with the collaborative care?
Yes, but there was some hesitancy on the administrator side. He was worried that it was going to be Medicaid fraud, which it is not.
They wanted to make sure you weren't double dipping. And I imagine you then had to say, here's a division of the hours.
Right. Yeah, exactly, Mike, because they were fearful. But those hours that they gave me were just enough to do like the compliance checks to make sure, everything's in date and stuff. And then also to do like the pharmacy and therapeutics meetings or the projects that they were giving me in addition to the clinical services. I also take private pay patients, and what I do is I'm playing around with the model, but $200 a month, so $200 for the first month, and we do like extensive top to bottom comprehensive med management.
What's your goal on social media?
A couple. So the goal for social media for me is really marketing. I think I always use social media as a marketing tool, but really marketing to who I am, right? So you want people to get to know you. And I think a lot of times when people get to know you and you're very authentic, like, I don't sugarcoat things. There's not anything fake on there. I'll put everything down to that I'm on anxiety meds, everything about motherhood, my struggles. I think it's really to just show like, hey, I'm just like everybody else. I think, yes, I want to, of course, market my business, but my ultimate goal is to help as many medically complex kids as I can. And so I think by doing that, if you're relatable and you can show and you're open about what you're doing and your trials and your failures, usually, the other things come more authentically and dribble in.
I know I've seen you on LinkedIn. What's your division between the different social platforms, and obviously you have a different audience on those.
Yeah. So, Mike, I ended up on this journey of buying my own business because I did multi-level marketing for many years. So
you did?
I did. So that kind of gave me the carriage. So when my youngest daughter was 1, I joined Rodan & Fields and actually was able to supplement my pharmacist salary by over half. And so from that, I learned the skills, the mindset, right? Like I learned the mindset, and I also, on top of it, learned people don't like fake marketing. They want you to be authentically you. And so it doesn't benefit you or your patients, in this case, your clients. So you want to be relatable. And so I kind of built that skill through Facebook and Instagram on my personal pages. And so I would always just real life stuff, right? What motherhood struggles I was having that day, or I always try to put like mindset, inspirational things.
So that's kind of your customer base per se. Well, that would be more the individual customers.
Exactly.
And then what are you going after on LinkedIn?
Yes, exactly. So my individual customers has always been Facebook and Instagram. And then on LinkedIn, honestly, I'm trying to reach as many people as possible, because when I envisioned Perfecting Peds and when I started, it was not to just be in the local tri-state area, New Jersey, Delaware, and PA, because I think that will come organically, or it has been coming organically, because I have all these connections, right? And so I don't want only those kids to benefit. I want this to be the long term, and I want every state to have a Perfecting Peds. So my goal, quite frankly, is to selfishly to promote Perfecting Peds, but to also motivate and inspire other pharmacists to let them know that they can do this too. Because I think, there's no gain from me doing that, but I think we all really can learn from other people who motivate us.
So a lot of times, Jen, people in your position, and frankly, I think a lot of people do it too quickly, are becoming business coaches to new businesses. And I think sometimes they're jumping in to coach something they haven't even successfully done yet.
Well, I agree. It's funny. That's why I was laughing, because I completely agree. So my heart is clinical and the patient, and how can I scale this? How can I affect as many patients? So I'm thinking like, I don't have any good connections, but like PBMs, insurance, I envision in 5 years, I'll be matched with one of them, and they'll just give me these medically complex pediatric patients. I laugh because I got asked to do like some educational thing. Like it was, if you could educate a pharmacist and that wants to do pediatric and maternal, medicine. And I said, yeah, of course. So I said, I'm going to be honest, this is not what my interest is. So I'm going to hire somebody else to do it, and I'll gladly approve her content and stuff.
You mean not only teaching her how to help people, but how to start their own business doing this?
No, this was just purely for education. Like, how would you teach other pharmacists to be a pediatric and maternal health pharmacist? Like, if I'm a retail pharmacist and I have interest in fetal, maternal medicine and pediatrics, what would you teach me? So I was like, that's a great opportunity for Perfecting Peds to educate pharmacists so that more pharmacists feel empowered for that to have that pediatric patient and not be like, oh crap, they're so scary. But then I was been also asked a bunch of times if people could pay me to coach them. And literally you took the words out of my mouth. One, I'm just enough, I'm just getting seasoned in just the local area. If I scale, because we have a couple really cool opportunities that are coming up, if and when, I'm going to say when I scale, because, everything's mindset, and years down the road, maybe, but that's not where my heart is right now. And I don't have the patience to coach people. I don't have the patience to teach. And so I think too, knowing your own limitations, I've never been a good teacher. And so I have no interest, but I do see that that was the hardest thing when I was trying to find a business coach for starting Perfecting Peds, because I did hire a business coach. But I was dumbfounded, was like, wait, you're coaching, but you're not doing any of the things you're coaching. So how is that valuable to either one of us? And that was a routine thing I was finding.
Some people can do that. Some people, they know their love's going to be teaching and coaching. It's an honest development of saying, maybe I haven't done it, but I spent 5 years at this university learning this, and I have my MBA and my PhD and things like that. I'm not pretending I was successful in this. I just teach it. I just coach it. But I think it has to do with being somewhat honest of the perception you're putting across to people.
Yeah.
In your field, you can either fake it till you make it or show your journey. And I think especially in your situation, to have parents relate to you, that's a better way to go.
And I think too, where you are at your season in life, because I remember you saying, you know, what's your activity on LinkedIn versus Facebook and Instagram. My Facebook and Instagram, I used to post like at least 4 to 5 times a week. But now I put my energy towards LinkedIn because I'm noticing that like that's kind of where my season of life is, like more professional. Like I'm enjoying professional networking and actually, you know, enjoying reading other people's stuff on LinkedIn. And I like the mindset and the positivity that a lot of stuff is on LinkedIn. Whereas like my season of life of looking at like people argue about, you know, dumb things on Instagram and Facebook isn't really there right now where it was 4 years ago. So I think it really is true that everybody has their season.
You see this with real estate people. I rarely would go on social, on Insta or Facebook, on my personal account.
Right.
And promote my pharmacy. I might, years ago, maybe if I had an article in the paper or something like that, I might have done that about our pharmacy or things like that. But the real estate people, all the time they're putting on their personal stuff, like here's this house, here's this, and it just seems like focused on that industry. It's kind of strange. It'd be like me saying, buy medicine from me all the time to everybody I know personally.
Right. It does get a little bit of overkill. But you know what I've done for a long time, and I really didn't think much of it, and it was way before I even had my own business, was I always would post like common tips that I encountered in my parenting journey that related to pediatric medicine, because I always felt like I'm so blessed to have this knowledge. And I would always think, what would a parent do that didn't have this knowledge? Where would it escalate to? You know, this is the wrong antibiotic choice. This is something that can be bought over the counter. This is, you know, even like for my daughter, like I was the first one to intervene on her speech therapy. So what should we be looking for? So I always, before I even, you know, became a business owner of my own pediatric pharmacy consultant business, I always found myself that if I could provide value to one other person authentically, that's really what I wanted to do, because I think we're in a really unique, blessed situation to have this medical knowledge. And so how can we help other people?
As I think about my statement on real estate agents, I think that's good because you're giving tips.
Right.
You know, and I can see like a real estate person saying, hey, you know, winter's here, put 3M clear stuff on your windows or do this for your gutter, you know, whatever.
Right.
But just to say, you know, I sell houses, it'd be like you going on there and, you know, buy the medicine or buy my consulting or something like that. It's just overkill.
Yeah. No, I think that's also, I think in general with just social media, I think whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think intentionally you have to really be aware of not being pushy. And that's interesting enough. Something I learned in MLM is that really you should be thinking about is how can I provide value to other people, regardless of what topic it's on. But for me, like I said, before I even owned this business, it was always with my own kids thinking, you know, would a mom who's not a pharmacist or in the medical profession know this? And if the answer was no, then I'd just like write it, you know, short, quick. I think it also, COVID too, a lot of people relied on pharmacists for reliable information on, you know, the vaccines. And so that was something, especially when it became available to the pediatric population. I think that was that was owned on us, because I think a lot of people were looking for pharmacists for that guidance and that reassurance and the knowledge. And that was another way I used social media too, is to really relate just reliable facts. because there was so much other stuff going on in the background.
I'm the biggest a-hole of them all because I think I'm doing it right. I mean, that's the worst kind of person you want, who thinks they're doing it right and the other persons are doing too much or too little. But I don't know. The whole thing's just an interesting thing. One of the comedians, I forget who it was. I think it was Norm Macdonald, God rest his soul. Years ago, it was, hey, do you want to see a picture of your great uncle? Here's this picture we found. He's on the farm, feeding the hogs. And then our kids, like in 30 years, it's going to say, hey, do you want to see 200,000 pictures of Grandma Mary and see what she had for lunch every day? Jena, do some people really bug you?
In social media, real life?
In life?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you get pissed at them?
I would say it's a small select handful, but yes, of course, you're always going to have those people.
What are their traits you don't like?
I think what gets me the most upset is when somebody has a big talk but no action. I cannot stand that. So I think somebody who, talks a big talk but then doesn't get things done.
Where do you see that?
I think that's why, Mike, to go back to why I think it'd be such a bad coach is that, I think so many of us, people will be like, oh, can I steal an hour of your time? And you give them an hour of your time and you give them, recommendations. This happens quite frequently to pharmacists. They have this big goal and they're talking and they just don't do, I just am just put things into action.
In this scenario, who would ask for the hour of your time? Someone who's trying to
build a business.
They're trying for some shortcuts through you. And you're saying, just do it for a couple years. You'll learn more than I do even.
I think there's when people have that where they're scared to do anything that, that fear where you're just frozen. I'm always just do it. Just try it. There's so many people who are so fearful to do so many things. And I was just thinking about this before. I think I'm not necessarily a risk taker, but you learn through action. And so I get annoyed. Like I said, if I was somebody's coach and they were coming back and reporting and talking a big game, but no actions are being taken to get them there. That's probably where I'm the most short-circuited.
I've talked to some other people on this. I think pharmacists are pretty good at that because you've got your initials behind your names and it's fairly easy to get some other certifications. I mean, in the scheme of things.
Right. We want to go crazy with the certs.
It's probably easier to get some more letters behind your name than spending that same amount of hours, doing it.
Doing something that's scary or different.
When I started the podcast, this is 3 years ago, everybody has a tendency to say, okay, I'm going to do a website and then I'm going to line this up and I'm going to buy this and all this kind of stuff.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
And my first show, if people go back and listen to it, it was just a free program on my phone. I had the idea and an hour later, I was talking to my first guest and it sounded crappy, but I thought, if it's bad, I don't have to put it out. I can dump the show. I haven't. It's my show number 1. I can dump it. I can do a lot of different things. It's kind of like a boat. If you steer the boat, but it's not moving, it doesn't mean anything. You got to start moving. Even if you're going in the wrong direction, the rudder's going to work versus just sitting there.
And I think too, I try to make my girls be very solution oriented. If you see a problem, find a solution. I hate when people just dwell on the problem. So I think that's another thing that really gets me too. And actually my 5-year-old, probably one of the best solution solvers ever.
Where did you get that from?
100% my grandfather. He was he was very soft-spoken. He was very nice and he was humble.
But he got the job done.
Boy, did he get the job done.
And he was in pharmacy, you had mentioned.
Yeah, he had worked at GlaxoSmithKline. He was part of the team that discovered the association of dopamine with Parkinson's. And he has over 150 patents. He wrote all these books, but he was very humble. And so he always instilled in me, you can be smart, you can be humble, you can be and actually I'm way louder than he is, but he was always someone who always got things done. And he was not one to make excuses. And so I think that's the excuse thing, especially in my children already at 5 or 3. I'm like, that I'm very quick to call them out. Like, that's an excuse.
Jena, was that all from you being perceptive, or did he verbalize that to you?
No, just perception, because he never said any of that.
It's very good perception on your part, though, because I might think somebody is friendly and soft-spoken, but I wouldn't take the leap to say they get stuff done. Part of that was the metrics of his 150 patents, right? You knew he moved along.
But he never talked about that. Like, it took for him to actually...
So when did you realize he did anything instead of just, a grandpa, buying you lifesavers?
He was awesome. He taught me a lot of valuable lessons. If you're smart or if you have a skill someone else doesn't have, he did over hundreds and hundreds of elderly people's taxes in his town for free.
You saw that?
Yeah. So I saw him doing it because he's like me. Like, I always like to stay busy. He liked to keep himself busy. So I always noticed he always gave back. So that was always huge too. But he knew how to lead effectively. Like, he was a no BS man that got a lot of things done because he was always at a director level wherever he was, but he was very humble. So I didn't really learn about the depth of all the patents and the books until he died, and my grandma actually started giving me a lot of his things. And I was like, this man's amazing. So he, motivates me even, daily, even from just living in his and reading his books. And actually, the other day, my grandma gave me his resume. There's 11 grandchildren, but it's cute because she gives me anything pharmacy related. And so I really cherish that and hold on to obviously all that.
So I take it that your parents are slackers? If you had to jump the generation?
Yes, exactly.
Don't they feel like slackers when they hear you talk about your grandpa?
I know. And so this is my mom, she always inappropriately be like, well, I'm just a nurse, which we know nurses are amazing. But she would see me and my grandfather always commiserate on, pharmacy and medications and all this stuff. And my mom would be like, well, I'm just a nurse. But it was really sweet. When my grandfather was put on hospice, he would only let me dose and give his morphine. So he waited till I drove. It was 2.5 hours, 3 hours. And my mom was wildly offended. She was there and she's like, I'm the nurse. But yeah, we definitely always had a special bond.
It seems like the lesson that I live with and maybe give to others is do the best you can do. People don't know your mental illness. They don't know your sticking points. They don't know, what you've been through and attacks on you and all this. Nobody knows that but you. So do your best, but do.
Right.
Do. And I think that's the problem, is that we all have our fears and this and that, but great men have said it. You might be scared, but do it. And do it dirty. It's going to be dirty, but do it. Despite your fears.
This is a perfect example. That's why I was laughing when we were talking about how I implemented. I kind of worked backwards, how I got the hours, and I realized oh crap, I need more staff. And then I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get paid for this? And you know what? Hopefully I look back and laugh because it's just you figure it out and it's not going to be perfect. Really enough, part of my journey has been that I have OCD. I was diagnosed with it postpartum, and my favorite quote, actually I have it tattooed on my body, is get comfortable in the uncomfortable. Because I think that's a large part of OCD is you latch on to thoughts and then you're like, why did I think that? And then you think it again. And so I kind of just embraced it as my life mantra of, get really comfortable in the uncomfortable. And once you get too comfortable, then you got to do something else. But I think that's how we kind of grow and stretch. And I think people are so scared to get out of, I was at my previous hospital that I just left to start my own business for 14 years. I was there as a student and I was left for a little bit and then came back for 8 years. I was so comfortable there. And so, I think it would have been easy just to like continue my journey there on and on. But I was like, felt like I was going to throw up when I quit because I was like so nervous about it. And I had developed such a rapport with my boss. But I'm like, you never get this time back. And time, just as we were talking about before, goes so quickly. So I never want to see like, yeah, I had that X, Y, and Z idea, but I never did anything on it. And then I look back and it's like 15 years later. And so that would be my biggest fear.
I tell my kids, this is the best time if you have ideas to keep moving, just do it because, there's no middleman like there used to be. Think of, Justin Bieber, who made it just up on his own through YouTube. And the list goes on and on about authors who have just been on group things and have pushed their stuff. So there's no middleman. And it's so easy, like in Tim Ferriss's book, A 4-Hour Work Week, he has a part in there I liked about A/B testing. It's so easy. If you have an idea for a business, just put 2 posts on LinkedIn. You don't even have to buy a Google ad. Just put 2 posts on LinkedIn and see which one has more attention and say, oh, well, maybe that's a better idea than this is. I mean, you can get thousands and thousands of dollars in market research, which would have cost you that 20 years ago. You can get that in like the next morning after a post comes out to see if it has any teeth to it. Right. There's no excuse really to not move, and anxiety and fear and OCD, and even that's not an excuse because I've got some of those, and you just keep moving, you move through it.
Yeah, I think if you can get through some of those valleys, I think that if anything, you have more resources and tools to push yourself to just use those tools that you had to get through those little blips in your mental health to then, create something bigger and better and to continue to go. I think if anything, I always am appreciative that I've had, those journeys postpartum and through high school where it was really tough because then it shows you like, oh, I pushed through that. I can do anything.
We had some big family legal stuff like 15 years ago. But at the time, I wasn't suicidal, but I just felt I was going to die. There was so much pressure on me. And at the time, I got a psychiatrist, therapist, SSRI, benzodiazepine. I had that. I made it through.
Right.
And I'm stronger now because,
oh God, yeah.
I tell you, when I felt I was going crazy and the SSRI wasn't doing it for me, I got that prescription of Klonopin and I said, if this doesn't work, I might die. I didn't know if it was going to work. And I knew that the pain I was feeling, again, I wasn't suicidal. I just felt like I was going to die. That pain was so strong. I was fearful to take the Klonopin because I thought if that doesn't work, that's my last option. I'm going to die. And so the fact that then I went through it, and now if I went through something as similar, I don't think I would, but I would know I'm going to make it.
Right.
I know the answer to it. And so going through that stuff, it does make you stronger and more wise.
Yeah. And I think too, you're like, kind of like live life like, okay, what's the biggest thing I have to, like, I have to lose? Like I can totally get through it. And like with this business, I'm like, okay, if it, God forbid it goes horribly or whatever, then I, go back to my old job. Like, I think people don't realistically think like we catastrophize everything. And then I'm always asked like, well, really, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I fail and then I go back to my old job. Like, that's okay.
The biggest catastrophe that could happen that would just have wiped me out?
What?
Having twins. That would have just sucked. I can't imagine that.
I don't know. I think you guys would have definitely gotten through it with 10 kids under your belt.
Twins would have sucked.
10 kids.
I know, but they were individuals.
Oh my God.
Would you like to have twins?
No. There would be, when we talked about outsourcing, I'd be having a night nurse over here helping me. There's no...
It would have driven me batty.
Yeah, really. I feel like that's when you kind of have to, you really have to use other resources for sure.
Twins. And then I'd have to start nursing and stuff. It just would not have been pretty.
That's different.
I love coaches and things, but it's cool that you're staying in there, giving it your best effort, despite challenges, despite having 3 kids. Thankful that you don't have twins.
Thankful I don't have twins. Yeah. So interestingly enough, Mike, I bought my LLC and the next week found out I was pregnant with my 3rd. So I said,
is that right?
Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to see what happens.
Well, I say, Jena, that there are a lot of things that are going to drive us crazy in life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe in an afterlife, I don't know, let's say there's one out there.
Right.
The only thing that's going to escape this world with you is souls that you have created. None of your anxiety or none of your material stuff, nothing good or bad is going to outlast this world.
Right. So true.
Except souls. And so if you're going to have something that's driving you batty in life, you might as well have souls do it instead of just job crap.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm very much like we have so many opportunities. Like you should try to genuinely be happy where you are. Cause I think there's so many people that are in the position too. I loved my job. I loved it, but not being there for my kid, from the hours of 7 to 3:30 really ate at me, and not having the flexibility. So it was kind of like a 2-for-1 where I was like, oh, these medically complex kids need help and mommy wants to have a remote job. So there you go. Let's make it work.
Some of the local chains have had some problems in the last month, more than they've ever had before.
Yes, I'm very well aware.
And we're finally getting some customers that we live 3 doors down from you, and my parents knew your grandparents and all this stuff. It's like, why the hell did it take
I know,
a catastrophe at another pharmacy to get you here? And I think the issue is people don't want the pressure of making decisions. If it's good enough, if life is good enough, you don't want to do something that's going to be worse because you kick yourself in that. But there's a lot out there that if you take those chances, some might turn out crappy, but a lot might turn out great.
Right. I think so too.
Well, Jena, golly, good having you on.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you. We'll talk again soon.
Take care, Mike.
Thank you.